Well, it is certainly good to be back and talking about actual game activity. This is our monthly Inside the Booth podcast and a star-studded edition. I'm not sure why it's taken so long for the four of us to get together. You can see Steve Jolley, my partner on the New York Red Bulls radio network, Shep Messing, Steve Cangelosi, the best TV crew in all of Major League Soccer. I will have to, though, start with this. Steve, and I say Steve, I'll say Jolley, to differentiate the two. There's a little bit of an elephant in the room. There was some hostility about what time we were actually going to do this podcast. It was radio versus TV. And here I thought, Giles, we were all on the same team, right?
You know, me and you, we're always on the same team. But there was some text that was, I think they copy and pasted a picture of some text from the other two guys that were a little harsh for you, buddy. But I got your back. You know that. And I'm ready for however long this takes. I'm on your side, buddy.
On behalf of the TV crew, let me just say, if you guys need to stop and continue at any time, I'd love to rearrange my whole week around your availability. So there are no worries here.
And listen, here I was thinking Shep from his days with the Cosmos and that whole scene back then. I was thinking later would be early. I think, Shep, we could have gotten you on at like 6 o'clock this morning if we needed to.
Listen,
you haven't gone to sleep.
It's what time I was rolling in, but
yeah.
The matter is, the TV guys here, and we're all a team, but I'm speaking for Cangelosi and myself. I don't know about you and Jolley, but we're embarrassingly available, so we can anytime.
You know, that's one thing to start with. And Shep, let's stay with you with this one. Just during this whole scene, you think back the last time that any of us actually did a game, that second week of March when the team was in Real Salt Lake playing in Utah. And since that point, it's been 4 months essentially of nothing. From a personal standpoint, everything okay?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking. And look, this is for all of us and everybody around the world, unprecedented times, and everybody is navigating it at their own pace. As for me, I've been collecting turtles and reptiles and reading books and doing push-ups every hour on the hour. So I'm in tremendous shape.
Solid.
Goodness, family good, health good. So we're all trying to navigate it. Hopefully we'll navigate it well.
Kanji, you know, for you, not only the start of the MLS season, but you were at the back end of the NHL season. You want to talk about a full stop. You've gone from super busy to not a whole lot of activity.
I was literally stepping out of the shower on the morning of March 12th, ready to go to Prudential Center for what is typically a long game day work day, when I got the call to stay home, likely no game. And sure enough, that was the case. And here we are some 4 months later. And that was the welcoming thing about the tournament starting in Orlando, just to see two teams in the heat of battle, real competition, with Orlando's victory over Inter Miami. So yes, but we're blessed in the sense that everybody in this household is still very healthy. I spend a lot of my time making phone calls concerned about family and friends. And I think the toughest part that you guys can relate to here, there's a disconnect with the teams and the players that we love and respect. We want to get back to that as soon as possible. We're just not sure about any timeline. The next time we'll be inside Red Bull Arena and calling a game with the fans who love this team. That's the thought that keeps coming back to me, Matt.
You know, Kanji, you just said it, the MLS is back tournament now up and going. First game was Orlando and Miami. When you think of it, how exciting was it, to me at least? And listen, there's been other leagues, the Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, everybody in Europe essentially back up and going. But just to have Major League Soccer get up and start again, it was pretty fun to see this past week.
I got to tell you, as the evening wore on, the event and the broadcast in particular, I warmed up to. There are some things you have to get used to. The virtual ads on the side of one field, the audio coming. Sometimes I think it was a home run. Sometimes I think it left a little bit to be desired. And of course, this is a very expensive tournament for Major League Soccer to put on. So we're seeing some new wrinkles like the Adidas logo in the middle of the field. Somebody has to pay for a lot of expenses here. And guys, I've come to the table here in the spirit of things with my MLS Adidas shirt this morning. But in all seriousness, I think it was a good first step. And I think this has a World Cup feel to it. Think about it. We're going to be watching live MLS games every day between now and July 23rd. That is significant considering where we are right now in the American sports landscape.
Giles, when you think of it, I did our coaches podcast the other day with Chris Armas, and the idea of this tournament with, as Kanji just said, kind of a World Cup feel. Get out of the group stage. Can you make it to the knockout round? There's no waiting to get yourself back up and going like there might be during the course of the beginning part of the season. It's pretty much hit the gas pedal and go.
Well, Matt, you said it, and I love the tournament feel. There's no question about that. And for Red Bull in specific, it's not only the tournament feel and them making sure that they're focused on the next couple of months and hopefully beyond, but they're going right at it. They're playing Atlanta. They're playing Columbus. Those are two teams that some believe might be the best teams in the Eastern Conference right now. So if you want to kind of benchmark ourselves, it's going to start on Saturday night without question.
Shep, when you think of it, this Red Bull team, certainly over the last several years, you could make the argument has been the best regular season team in all of Major League Soccer. I think this year, in the 2020 edition of it, the roster was questioned a little bit going into the beginning part of the season. They get the win against Cincinnati, the draw in Utah, and even when you talk about this tournament specifically, it's almost as if, as Steve just said, you're in a group with Atlanta and Columbus. Everybody's kind of forgotten a little bit that this New York Red Bull team has been among the best in Major League Soccer the last several years.
Wouldn't it be ironic, guys, in the 25th year in the history of this franchise, with everything going on in the year 2020, wouldn't it be ironic if Red Bulls just tear it up? They win this tournament, they win the league, they win MLS Cup. I mean, it would be poetic justice with all the ups and downs this franchise has had if they do it all this year. But back to your question, look, I think if any one of us is trying to predict what's going to happen in this tournament, give me a break. I mean, we have no idea. We have no idea. I could tell you I don't think Cincinnati is going to do anything. And after watching Inter Miami and Orlando, I don't think they're going to do anything. But I think Red Bulls, this team, even given the limitations or questions we had when the season started, how do you replace Kamar Lawrence, Murillo, Bradley Wright Phillips? Who's going to be the striker up top? Is it going to be Tom Barlow, Brian White? All those questions we have, throw them out the window. I think Red Bulls can really do damage in this tournament. Obviously, if they play well collectively together, we talk about the heat. We talk about where do you initiate that pressure. I think Red Bulls are a dangerous team in this tournament.
Giles, that was something that you and I talked about, just from the idea of two things, right? You could go into this tournament and say there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder for this New York Red Bull team, but also as you get back into it, having such a defined style of play, you would think gives them just the tiniest bit of advantage, maybe to be a surprise in this tournament.
Well, I think that, having that kind of set style of play, I think gives them more advantage than, as Shep mentioned, than a lot of people are giving them credit for. Let's face it, this team has become younger. And there's a key, I think a huge key that I've spoken to a couple people about. You've got 5 subs in this tournament. That's huge for this Red Bull team in terms of being able to press. And for me, I definitely think we've got the benchmark games with Atlanta and Columbus. But this is a team that I think has excelled exceptionally well in a number of ways in terms of coming together. I think Sean Davis has done an absolutely incredible job of bringing his leadership, which is the different leadership personality than maybe Robles brought or Bradley Wright Phillips. So this is a young team that's spirited. I think Below's playing exceptionally well right now, playing with a lot of confidence. So I expect a lot from him. This is a team that I'm really, really excited to see against Atlanta because, I think we've always had a team of grit. We know about the pressure. We know about the style. But I just think this is a team that's going to take it to the next level over this tournament. And they're looking at this tournament as a focus point in terms of just shocking everybody, I think, because people are writing them off a little bit.
Kanji, when you think of it, you and I talk to Chris on a weekly basis, getting set for games and preparing for all of our broadcasts. He has preached the idea of this team being together more so this year than any other year. And you would think coming out of preseason, you get 4 points out of the first 2 games with FC Cincinnati and with Real Salt Lake, and now almost having to kind of recreate this preseason feel. The idea of this team all being on the same page maybe carries them in this tournament through the first couple of games.
I think that's a helpful spirit. And to pick up on Jolley's point, I do think this with 5 substitutions, and remember, a game day roster, guys, of 23 players. I think the depth of each one of these teams clearly plays in to what we're going to witness over the next 5 weeks. As far as the group coming together, I've never had that doubt, even with the noticeable absentees from 1 year ago. Team leaders, part of that core, as Luis Robles used to tell us, Robles himself, Bradley Wright Phillips, and others. But I do think the mantle has been passed to good young men who can carry that. We talk about togetherness, but let's be frank, guys, with one glaring exception from the last time we saw this team play back on March 7th, and that's Josh Sims, who's no longer with this club after the return to Southampton. I think about that only in this sense. This is a 23-year-old fine young player who I thought would have brought something very valuable to a tournament like this in particular. Remember, he didn't start the first 2 games for this team, that victory and the draw, but he still came on as a second half sub. And I think that's basically the template of the perfect kind of player that you would want to help you win games in this tournament. That's a big loss. So as far as Chris Armas goes, I will say this. I think that the game day management of MLS coaches during this tournament is probably more important than at any other time in the regular season in this team's history. 5 subs, how do you utilize them? And also in the heat of Orlando, regardless of the start time of these games, I think that plays a big factor in what we're watching.
Shep, let's follow up on that with you. You think for this Red Bull team, having seen them the first couple of games of the season and now restarting things 4 months later, what would be the biggest question marks for this team in your eyes?
Well, Matt, I think the question mark really, as it relates to this tournament, let's all not forget it's 4 months of inactivity. I mean, yes, they're working out on their own, social distancing, but 4 months, a real void in terms of training as a team. So coming into this tournament, and Steve Jolley can speak to it, there's a saying in our sport, it's easier to destroy than to create. So it's easier to defend than have that fluidity and rhythm and precision to get forward and score goals. So I think defense is going to be huge, and goalkeeping, especially in this tournament. Back to your original question. Look, my question about the team is still up front, right? Tom Barlow, Brian White. You would love to see Brian White replicate what he did when he started out. Same for Tom Barlow, but let's be honest. When you look at the other teams in Major League Soccer, that position in particular, it's cross your fingers that those guys can produce.
Steve, pick up on that point.
Yeah.
I know the idea of having that young guy up top has been the idea for Red Bull this year. You lose Bradley Wright Phillips in the offseason, and essentially you hand the reins over of that number 9 position to some young guys. And I think all 4 of us would agree that before he got hurt, Brian White was one of the best stories of Major League Soccer last year. He was productive. He was there. He was involved. He was active. But now, is he the guy to carry things with this team, with a Tom Barlow, with maybe a Matthias Jorgensen that could factor in during the course of these games?
I'm going to get to that question, but I'm going to bring on or at least extend an idea that Shep was talking about in terms of some big keys. And I agree wholeheartedly about the importance of that core defense. We need Tim Parker and Aaron Long 2018 style. 2019, it was too much up and down. We need that consistency in the back line, especially since there's a new keeper in back. I like how Caceres has stepped up the game. He's stepped up his game big time. And Sean Davis, I think, has done a great job in terms of leadership. He's been consistent. But again, it goes back to what you were saying before. It's the front runners that I'm most worried about. And I'm not worried about in terms of Tom Barlow and Brian White, because I think they did an exceptional job stepping in. It's just what Shep said. I mean, that's it. We're at a point now where teams are spending millions and millions of dollars of big time strikers. I mean, you look at, obviously we're not going to see Josef Martinez on Saturday night, but that's the level and the caliber. That's not saying Brian White and Tom Barlow aren't that caliber. And I'm actually thinking that a Brian White and Tom Barlow will actually excel in this tournament because they have that grit. They have that passion. They're going to do whatever is humanly possible to get inside the box and just create and just be nasty, almost like a Taylor Twellman kind of style. And I think that's going to benefit them through this tournament. But taking this team to the next level, the upper echelons of Major League Soccer, you got to spend some money.
Can't you?
And
When
I'm really expensive. I'm really expensive nowadays too. So I don't think they can handle me.
we've talked about that so many times, Giles.
I'll just bring it up because I hope at some point it just sticks somehow.
Chris,
I'm getting in shape with like Shep and I are getting in shape. He's doing push-ups. I'm starting to run again. Cangelosi is wearing old MLS gear, logo stuff. We're bringing it back. This is going to be good stuff.
25th anniversary, and I don't think any of us have an opportunity to see the field ever again. Kanji, when you kind of think of this in the idea of how the roster is constructed, you talked about the change in leadership. Shep and Steve both mentioned younger guys maybe having the opportunity to step up, and maybe even guys, because of this expansive roster and the ability to use 5 subs, you would have to think for all of these teams in Major League Soccer, there's going to be guys that open eyes that maybe you didn't have any idea that they were really going to be part of how things were going to play out in the beginning part of the season because of expanded opportunities.
Well, Matthias Jorgensen comes to mind, right? Because maybe now with 3 games, and let's not forget, in the backdrop of this tournament, guys, the first 3 games, group stage, do count towards the regular season. These are important games against Atlanta, Columbus, and FC Cincinnati. Do we see some extended run here by Matthias Jorgensen at some point as a guy who's still so young? The player I'm interested in seeing, and I do think we'll see him make his MLS debut perhaps as early as Saturday night, is Jason Pendant. Now, Shep Messing and I did the last game against Real Salt Lake, and I know my partner, who can be very critical, even though overall he's very supportive of the team, looked at a player like Patrick Seaghurst, who came in, had a start in the first 2 games, but probably could have showed himself a little bit better than he did because each one of those games hung in the balance. Let's be frank, that's a very, very tough adjustment for a guy who was a 4-year player at Marquette to come in and suddenly start as an MLS player. But if Pendant gets the call as a starting left back, and in some way, if he completes this back 4, maybe not to the extent that we saw 2 years ago, where it was far and away the best back 4 in MLS, but if he makes this more whole, then I think you're into something good. Because just to take this back to something that Jolley and Shep were talking about, the strength of this team clearly, I think, is that now at the start of this tournament, you have Aaron Long, you have Tim Parker, and Amro Tarek, in any chance he gets to perform at center back, is never going to embarrass you. That's the core strength of this team, and that's why I think not enough people are looking at the Red Bulls in the big scope here. But those are the players, as far as the guys who are newer to the bubble here, that I'm looking forward to seeing over the next couple of games.
I'm going to go Jolley first here, and then Shep, back to you. Specific player questions to follow up on what Kanji was just talking about, Giles. You think of it, you've got Parker, you've got Long, you've got Tarek. Maybe the question's out the outside back. Can Pendant come in and take over the left back spot? You've got Manny Egbo, who's been working himself into the rotation a little bit. You've got Kyle Duncan. You've got Patrick Seaghurst, who got some time. Is that maybe where on the outside, those 2 positions, right back and left back? Because think of it in the style that New York plays, and you've seen Kamar Lawrence and Amir Murillo the last couple of years, getting wide and attacking has been such a big part of what this team does.
Yeah, I'm with Kanji all the way with Pendant. I'm fingers crossed on that one. But, I'm going to extend that to the other side of the field, and I want to see Kyle Duncan with some consistency. I want to see the same Kyle Duncan that we saw against Cincinnati in the first game of the season. For his game to take to the next level, or as my 10-year-old who thinks he's the greatest player in the entire world, and I keep on asking him, what do you see about him? He's like, something about him, Dad. And he can't articulate it very well, but I'm almost in the same respect. I can't articulate just the optimistic, views I have about Kyle Duncan, but I want him to have that consistency, because when he has played well, it's been like he's played well, but then the next game, a little inconsistent, maybe did some blunders defensively. I think for him, this is a season, especially if he has the Tim Parker next to him and the Aaron Long next to him, that have really kind of stabilized his confidence and just has that, the vocal communication, feels comfortable with him. I'd love to see Kyle Duncan take his game to the next level and be consistent, and just not just one good game and then a couple of iffy games. I need 5 or 6 really solid games that we can rely on him, getting forward, being creative, not having fear against players one-on-one. That's the Kyle Duncan that I want to see, especially in this tournament.
Shep, let's spend a couple of minutes on the position that you are very familiar with, the goalkeeping position, because going into the season, it was Ryan Mara essentially taking over for Luis Robles. David Jensen gets signed, and he winds up starting the first 2 games of the MLS season. Does Chris Armas use this tournament as an opportunity to kind of gauge who might be the number 1 moving forward, with the assumption that after this MLS is back tournament, there are games and there is potentially a run to the playoffs and in the MLS Cup?
Matt, great question. And of course, we have to talk about the most important player on the field. There's no doubt about it. The difference between 2 equal teams is the goalkeeper. I want to finish up on Steve and Jolley's point about the outside backs, and then get back to your question. I've sat with several general managers and coaches when they first put together their expansion team under the salary cap. And they built the spine of the team with a goalkeeper, 2 center backs, 2 defensive midfielders, a playmaker, striker, and the least amount of money was spent on the wide players, on the outside backs. Jolley, you know that.
Oh, yeah.
So there are very few great wingers in the league. And if you have a stud for a goalkeeper and 2 studs like Tim Parker and Aaron Long, I don't care what the outside backs do, right? Because it's all going to come to the center. Aaron Long, Tim Parker, and the goalkeeper can clean it up. To your question, look, Ryan Mara had the position, injury, Jensen steps in. I've seen a ton of videotape in Europe on Jensen. I think he's the real deal. So to your question about Chris Armas, you're out of the gate. He's got to pick his goalkeeper and go with it. If he hasn't already made up his mind, I'm not a big believer in rotation, okay? It's a number 1 and it's a backup. And the sooner the club knows who it is, the better they are. Jolley, again, you know the importance of knowing your goalkeeper. And whoever wins the job, I think both have talent. Obviously, Jensen, much more experienced at a higher level. And we all know Ryan, and when he's on, what he's done in the U.S. Open Cup runs, he's been outstanding. So it's going to be a battle, but the sooner Chris Armas decides who's the number 1, the better it is for the team.
Kanji, how about this one from the standpoint of the group stage for this Red Bull team? Atlanta, Columbus, Cincinnati. As Joel said before, teams that this club is very familiar with, having the rivalries with the first 2 and already played Cincinnati in the season opener. Does that benefit New York, you think, at all moving forward in this tournament?
I think their antenna is always up for an Atlanta game. So let's take each one as an individual entity, okay? We can argue who their biggest rival is. If you are old school and you want to say it's still DC United, or if you want to go geography and say it's NYCFC or Philadelphia, fine. To me, the Red Bulls' chief rival is Atlanta, and that's why I will think we would see on Saturday night the very best of what they have to offer. The matchup in particular that I'm looking for, even with Joseph Martinez out of the equation Saturday night, is that combination of Pity Martinez and Ezequiel Barco against the core strength of the team that Shep and Jolley were alluding to, the Red Bull center backs and how they defend. And whether or not Atlanta, if the Red Bull press is what I expect it to be Saturday night, how does Atlanta cope with that? And I do think this Red Bull team is better equipped to protect the lead in this tournament. As far as Columbus goes, I think everybody would agree this is a very improved team. Caleb Porter is a coach who wanted Darlington Nagbe. I know he told us as much word for word when he was coaching last year. He said, that's a guy who's going to complete my team. He got him, and that makes them all the better. I think this is a Red Bull team that'll finish in the top 2, that will go through to the knockout round of this tournament. I expect them to play well, better than most teams in this tournament in the early stages here. I think they also see the prognostications that are coming outside their bubble. A lot of people say it's Atlanta who can win the tournament, and Columbus slotted in at number 2. That's a chip on the shoulder I think they'll use to their benefit.
Giles, how about from this perspective, you think of it, how can you, from a mentality standpoint, as a player, conceptualize this tournament, knowing that you've got the 3 group games, hopefully you get to the knockout stage and advance in that, but you don't know what's coming after it. This could be the only soccer that some of these teams play, I mean, because we don't know what the schedule will look like after. We don't know what could happen in another month with the coronavirus situation. Can you as a player look at this and say, we're throwing all the eggs in this basket and we're going to try not only and win it, but make a couple extra dollars. Let's throw that in there and have an opportunity to qualify for Champions League next year.
Yeah, and that uncertainty, I guess, is the best way of saying it in terms of what's after this tournament. Even if this tournament is the finish, quite frankly. I mean, the way we're looking in terms of Nashville and everything like that, there's a lot of ifs. And so I'm with you wholeheartedly in that respect. I think this is a team that's kind of focusing literally game by game. I know it's a cliche, but in this specific situation, especially the way they're playing Atlanta, Columbus, and Cincinnati, it's going to be game by game. And I think for a lot of people, it is going to surprise some people outside of the kind of the Red Bull universe to see a team that is so young, that doesn't have the big stars, like a Joseph Martinez, a Pete Martinez, or, Barca, and even, I mean, you just name it, especially on the LA side. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that, there's something to be said in Major League Soccer to have a system, and you can rely on that system, and you can bring young players in and function in that system. Do we need maybe another player or two up top, offensive threats? Without question. But the combination of this being a one game, kind of take it all kind of mentality, not knowing the uncertainty of what's going on in their future in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not knowing anything like that. I think it's just, you're going to see a lot of players come together, a lot of young players come together and realize, which is really important, that they need to take this, step by step, game by game, enjoy the moment, and appreciate the fact that we're playing soccer. That's the big thing here. They have to appreciate the fact that nobody thought that we were probably going to start up again. They are given this chance. Make the most of it.
Guys, I want to finish with this. And Shep, I'm going to throw this to you because, quite honestly, I think you're in the best position to talk about this. Your experience in the game, which goes back to 1972, being in Munich, during one of the more historical Olympic Games. You see now the social causes that athletes, Major League Soccer, the start of the Orlando Inter-Miami game last night with everyone in unison. You were in Munich during the time of the Munich massacre. You see now how players can kind of get on that pedestal and try and support the need for change. What was your feeling last night when you watched the beginning of the Orlando-Miami game?
Well, Matt, it's still emotional for me anytime you mention Munich, but and the demonstration, the togetherness of the players last night. Remember, I was in the Munich Olympics 4 years after John Carlos and Tommy Smith raised the black glove on the victory stand. That was their protest for racial inequality. And 4 years later, in the village in Munich, when the Palestinian terrorists attacked the village and murdered 11 Israeli athletes and coaches, I was put in protective custody. So to your question, not a correlation between anti-Semitism and the racism that now has come to the forefront. Finally, I mean, how long did it take? 100 years, 200 years, centuries. I mean, so to see the players as a group united, it was fantastic to see. But, hashtags and social media, it has to be real change. And I'm sure the players and everybody is committed to real change. And that's financial, that's legislation, that's education, that's helping more than doing it on social media. But for a start, it was very moving. It was very emotional for me to see, and it was great to see.
Kanji, I'm just going to let you pick up and comment on that in any direction that you want.
Matt, it was powerful. And when it started, I had no idea. Maybe you guys were a step ahead of me that display was going to go for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The amount of time that the police officer in Minneapolis had his knee on the neck of George Floyd in that tragic happenstance. So I think anybody who watched it was moved by it. And I was also impressed by the interview with Justin Morrow at halftime, as this movement has been fortified by many players in MLS, black and white, of many racial denominations. And I thought it was a wonderful moment for the league with the platform that MLS had. I will say this, that as this tournament progresses, we're going to be dealing with something else that takes place outside the field of competition. And that is, we all know we've lost one team in this tournament already, FC Dallas. As we're having this show, the status of Nashville it is somewhat in doubt. For me, one of the real points of this tournament is going to happen at that 7 to 10 day mark into the group stage, when the report card of COVID and positive tests, I think, is going to come to the forefront, when players have been inside that bubble for roughly a span of 2 weeks. Where are we health-wise with the rosters of this teams? To this point, I think MLS has done an excellent job, but there's so much that we don't know about COVID, and that's in the back of my mind, potentially how this affects the balance of the tournament. But in terms of a message that was sent last night, that was extraordinary, I thought, by Major League Soccer's players, Matt.
Steve Jolley, last word on our Inside the Booth from you, my friend.
No, I'm with these guys. It was a powerful 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And one of the things that I think at least got me maybe emotionally was it wasn't by one individual. It wasn't by one team. It was by a bunch of players that came together within a league, and how the league's supporting it. I even get chills a little bit right now. One of the things that I've always appreciated about this sport is the wonderful diversity, celebrating that diversity. And I've never been more proud to be associated with Major League Soccer in any capacity, in the way of which they're handling it right now. Like I said, it was a powerful 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I wasn't aware of it, that they were going to do it. The fact that they did it, it kind of resonated with me. And I thought it was important because it wasn't just a message by one individual. It wasn't a hashtag or anything like that. It was a group of people coming together of like mind and making a very powerful statement that extends way beyond our borders, hopefully.
Guys, this was tremendous. It was great to get all four of us together and to listen to the three of you kind of get us back up and going for the start of the MLS's back tournament. Red Bull will start Saturday against Atlanta United, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Jolley and I will have the radio call of those games during the course of the tournament. Shep and Steve, I appreciate you guys hopping on with us. I can't wait to see both of you in person, hopefully pretty soon, and back at Red Bull Arena.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Hey, the four of us should get a show together. We're good together.
The four of us get a show. Next episode, it will be you and Jolley seeing which analyst can do the most push-ups. Cangelosi and I will see who can hold the longest note as some sort of singing announcer type thing. Again, more information on all the games coming up for this New York Red Bull team. You can go to the team website at NewYorkRedBulls.com. Again, Steve and I will have a pregame, postgame, endgame coverage for you of all three games down at the MLS's back tournament, starting on Saturday with Atlanta.